I got so fortunate because when you're a child, school and sports are so much of your life and your family life, right? And so I'm growing up in an immigrant family. So to begin with, that's gonna be less cush than a lot of people. You're just living a different life. Then in school, long before I got into 10th grade Spanish, 11th grade Spanish 1, because I failed German freshman and sophomore year, and Senora Kennedy saved my life. Long before that happened, 7 years before that happened, 4th grade was when I kind of transitioned from getting good grades to bad grades. And so this will make sense for everybody. School is a big factor in your life as a child. Your self-esteem is very wrapped up to what's going on in school. And so in 4th grade is when I started to get bad grades. And you know, when you're getting bad grades, report card after report card, and your teachers are disappointed in you and this kind of stuff, you're learning how to be resilient. You've got grown-ups, and first it starts with your teachers, because they can see it. And I got so fortunate that I had a mother who made consequences. I was grounded for my report cards, but I never felt that my self-worth or who I was gonna become was based on my grades. That was a fine line that talk about walking the middle, that's what my mom did brilliantly. I got bad grades, but I got grounded. There was consequences, but I never had my self-esteem wrapped up in it. So I was dealing with adversity very early on because not only are your teachers, and this is the 80s, so some of those teachers were not very politically correct in telling me what they thought about my future. And then you have your friends' parents who know that you're a bad student. And so they've got judgment on you. So basically, the grown-ups are looking at me like I don't know if everybody remembers, for some reason, which is crazy because I actually make a lot of money, but in the 80s, everybody loved to say, you're gonna be a garbage man, you know, and that was like the thing. And like, you know, I was feeling that, and then I was, again, playing a lot of sports. And ironically, 4th grade's a good year for me because up to 4th grade, I was dominant in sports because we are very gifted, the Vaynerchuk boys, with hand-eye coordination. We're good at that. The problem is somewhere around 4th grade is when size, speed, and athleticism becomes part of the equation. And so starting up until 4th grade, I was like one of the best players on my baseball team. It was going really great. And then all of a sudden there was a shift where other variables came into play, and now I'm losing, so I'm dealing with that every day. Ironically, I think it's why I fell in love with business. So I'm losing in school, I'm losing more often in sports, but when I sell baseball cards, or when I sell lemonade, or when I have a garage sale, I'm getting positive reinforcement from the customer. The market was giving me positive affirmation. And my mom was giving me positive affirmation to who I was as a person. And so I think when I look back and try to analyze it, I feel like the two things I became, a businessman and a nice guy, was very, very grounded in those formative years where those were the areas I was getting positive reinforcement on.
We're among friends here, right?
Yep.
Which is your favorite character?
That's good. How many people by show of hands have more than one child? Raise your hand. Who's your favorite kid? I know the answer from my mom and dad, but I think, I think for V-Friends, it ebbs and flows. I will say this, I'm obsessed with Accountable Ant. I haven't really developed him yet. I'm kind of saving him for a project I'm working on. But I will say the thing that I'm very passionate about right now is the lack of accountability in society. We have become, talk about something we've lost. We have become remarkable at pointing fingers and not thumbs. It is literally, absolutely everybody's fault but one's self. It's the president's fault. It's the government's fault. It's the governor's fault. It's your boss's fault. I mean, I watch entrepreneurs blame the customer. It's the customer's fault, they don't get it. No, they get it. Customers always get it. They vote with their wallet. Like, if it doesn't work, it's 100% your fault. And so, Accountable Ant is very, very high on my list. I would also say that Empathy Elephant is very big for me. I do believe that empathy is one of the great superpowers of society. I don't know how all of you are wired and your DNA, but for anyone here who actually has the ability to feel other people, not have compassion for them, not feel sorry for them, no, feel them. when you have empathy, you can really do very special things. You know, for me, empathy allowed me to be very caring, and I like that. I like being a good friend and a brother and all that. But more importantly, or actually far less importantly, but in hindsight, what I didn't realize was empathy also allowed me to be such a good salesman. It's very easy to sell when you know what they're gonna say yes to.
But doesn't it make it a little bit of a challenge in business where you're competing against the liquor store down the road, you know?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that comes into perspective. Now we're talking about perspective pigeon. You know, I think perspective matters. You know, it's fun to have my dad here. I think about the liquor store down the road. Like, him and I have a ton of similarities. Even though I love to like razz and say I'm like mom, like my dad, as I've gotten older, I realize how much DNA I have from my dad. But we are very different when it comes to competition. We see it differently. I'm very competitive, just like my dad. I just believe that the world is abundant. I believe that when you're talented, nobody stops you. I've never felt that any liquor store in New Jersey or any advertising agency in the world or any other personality that makes content or any other intellectual property that's being built right now, I don't think any of them are taking my customers. I think I'm good enough to get as much as I need. And I do believe the world is abundant. And so I love competing, but I'm incredibly not fixated or concerned about competition because I think it's a complete irrelevant from someone who's capable of executing. Nobody has ever stopped me but myself. Entrepreneurship is such a wild craft. Learning about I'm so fortunate in my life right now, I get to go to some of the greatest universities in the world and speak to entrepreneur class, and I look at the curriculum, I speak to the professors, and it's very challenging. Going to school to be an entrepreneur is like going to school to be a basketball player. You need to be on the court to be a basketball player. Entrepreneurship is taught in the trenches of the act of building businesses. You can learn principles, but I don't think anyone's confused. You can learn the principles of running a business through ChatGPT in full detail in 2 seconds. The reason I was jumping in, I just want everyone to hear this. My historic push on college was twofold. To your point, there's certain crafts that needed it less, like what the world I was in. But second, taking on extraordinary amounts of debt that had no correlation to getting an outcome was what I was yelling about 15, 10, 12 years ago. And I took a ton of heat for it. Most of the emails I would get would be parents yelling at me because they overheard me with their kid watching the video and they were upset. In this last decade, it is crazy to watch the repositioning of how we all as parents think about. There was shame for parents if their child didn't go to college. That's what was sending everyone to college. And then I got fortunate. I had parents that created a life for themselves and were willing to pay for it. What about the parents that were shaming their kids to go to college and making them take on the debt for something that was never gonna do anything for them? My argument was like, we need to talk about this. Honestly, the reason I don't really talk about it anymore is I think the world has figured this out in a much bigger way. And I meet parents all the time at airports and events and things like this where I can see it. They're not just giving me lip service because they think I'm cool. They're open to their child not going to college because we are starting to learn that there's not a direct correlation and the cost has gotten so extreme. And this is also, my other point was when we were growing up, there was no internet. Not only is there the internet, which has ungodly amounts of actual information, but this AI thing is real. Artificial intelligence is one of the most profound technologies in the history of time. The little ones in here right now, do you remember the yellow pages? And then we grew up, a lot of us, in the Google era. Google search, Mona, my fiance, is using ChatGPT multiple times instead of Google now. My brother AJ doesn't even use Google anymore. Fully ChatGPT. And it works better. If you know how to you gotta learn how to use it. I'm sure some of you remember, I myself remember, when search engines first came out, you had to learn how to use it well, you know? And so the world's, asking children to memorize information and regurgitate it on a blank piece of paper, what are we doing? That's not gonna cut it. And so, especially if we're pounding them with debt. And the debt part was always my part, because I was always close to 20 and 30-year-olds and could see how much it was killing them.